Welcome to the Calm Analytics channel. I'm Boris Tezengausen. June 14th, here are the main news stories at this moment. Well, let's start, of course, with a wonderful video that you could watch endlessly, a giant oil depot burning in the Russian Federation. Beautiful Yaroslavl region, Kopayevo micro-district, Temp oil depot. The locals there are simply in shock. They're asking, where is the air defense? After all, Putin literally just recently said that Russia has air defense. Well, everyone knows exactly where that air defense actually is. In fact, they're pulling additional air defense systems to Putin's residence. But of course, that's just epic footage. Our drones destroyed a critically important facility. I counted 60 storage tanks in the satellite image. This facility is located right on the bank of the Volga River. It is precisely because of its access to the Volga and the railway that it serves as a key logistics hub for storing huge volumes of fuel. Well, at least it used to serve that purpose, and for supplying military equipment. Here are those 60 storage tanks, each with a capacity from 2,000 to 5,000 cubic meters. It's simply a huge oil depot. It is part of the Russian Federation's State Material Reserve System. Simply put, it's a warehouse meant to supply the war effort for when market supply chains collapse. A little emergency reserve. From here, the Russian Federation supplies petroleum products to its northeastern regions and maintains strategic reserves for the needs of the army. So there was a strategic reserve for a rainy day, but as for that rainy day, I know, but the black rain has already started there. The locals are also shocked, sharing photos and videos. It's just like in two apps. Take a look.
Сегодня первый раз такое вижу. Воскресенье, 14 число, идет черный дождь. Просто реально черный. Вот сейчас покажу, что капает с крыши. Кот у меня весь черный пришел. Вот идут капли. Вот оно, вообще черное.
The people of Kopayevo have never been this rich. Oil is literally pouring from the sky. Why aren't you recording a video? Thank Putin for the oil rain. By the way, this oil depot is about 1,000 kilometers from the border with Ukraine and 300 kilometers from Moscow. Honestly, what a life. In Russia right now, living next to a major oil depot. It's not exactly a pleasure. Sooner or later, something will definitely hit if it hasn't already due to oversight. But it will hit. I've mentioned this before, but I think now is the perfect time to remind you. I'm addressing the directors of oil depots and oil storage facilities in Russia. Right now, you have a unique opportunity to make money. You might not get another chance like this. This is a real practical life hack. Since Ukrainian drones are already flying by the hundreds over Russian territory, you basically don't have to do anything. Just wait until an air raid alert is announced in your region. Set your oil depot on fire after selling off the fuel in advance, as much as you can. Leave a couple of tanks filled for a nice picture, just like in this case. You can sell off the rest and blame everything on Ukrainian drones and their debris. I recommend not to delay. This scheme will work until the end of summer. After that, there will be no oil depots or oil and gasoline left in the Russian Federation. And by the way, friends, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. It's important for the channel's promotion. You can do it right now. We are fighting against Putin's propaganda. And together, it's much more effective. So make sure to subscribe. But that's not all. Today, the Azot chemical plant in Novomoskovsk was also hit by Ukrainian long-range drones. This is in the Tula region, one of the largest chemical plants in Russia. The plant is of critical importance to the Russian military-industrial complex, that is, nitric acid, ammonium nitrate. All of this is used in the production of explosives. Methanol and technical gases like argon are also necessary for defense manufacturing. So, this plant supplied chemical products directly to the Sverdlov plant, where explosives for ammunition are made in Russia. Honestly, if I were an employee at the Sverdlov plant, I would have already quit, right now, this very moment. If a flamingo hits that explosives plant, it will just vaporize everyone into atoms. And it definitely will hit. Definitely. And now news from our Crimean partisans. There have also been strikes in occupied Crimea. Let me remind you, the Crimean partisans are a broad network of people who both carry out real acts of direct action, as they say, in occupied Crimea and gather crucial information. The network operates across the entire peninsula, and all these people, and there are many of them, are bringing the return of Crimea closer. Well, first of all, according to our Crimean partisans, a creeping evacuation has begun from Crimea. People are actually starting to leave, and some are already beginning to sell their property. This is all very serious. Local realtors, particularly those from Sevastopol, say that because of this, property prices have already started to fall, not only in Sevastopol, but throughout Crimea. Locals can't remember anything like this happening for a long time. And this isn't even stones from the sky yet. In about a month or a month and a half, prices will definitely be down by 20%. By the way, I recommend you start listing prices in hryvnias already, so get used to it. The most interesting thing is that FSB agents and high-ranking military officials, as well as the leadership and occupation authorities, are already quietly sending their families out of Crimea. For now, it's under the pretext of vacation and summer, but believe me, by September, those families won't be coming back. While the bridge is still there, by the way. So it turns out the road of death isn't working in the Azov region. Well, more precisely, it is working, but it's Russian roulette. The bridges over Henichesk, Chonhar, and Armyansk have also been destroyed. The port of Mariupol. Just a few days ago, our drones also took it apart and cut off the power. The cranes there were put out of commission. So in fact, only the Crimean bridge remains. And just imagine for a second, that it's gone. All of this, that's just it. It's a supply collapse. I'm not even talking about fuel anymore. That's why they're running. They're fleeing from a sinking aircraft carrier. Moreover, our drones in Crimea also destroyed the Crimean Titan plant, the largest giant plant in Eastern Europe in Armyansk, which Russia effectively stole. It belonged to the company Russian Titan. They re-registered it in their name, squeezed it out, of course. Well, we were engaged in the production of titanium dioxide, but until the day before yesterday, that is, around the clock, this enterprise was working for the aggressor's military-industrial complex. Not only were they poisoning the surrounding area, but they were also producing the basic raw materials for making gunpowder, rocket fuel, and explosives. Well, on the night of the 13th, our drone struck. Yes, so regarding this plant, the fire there still hasn't been fully extinguished, and production has stopped. Locals report that the entire plant was destroyed. There were 23 strikes, all the workshops were damaged, everything is burning, everything is ablaze, and people have been evacuated. In short, just the way you like it. Well, and now the most important thing. Crimean Titan is the only operating producer of titanium dioxide in Russia. There is no replacement. Imports are under sanctions. Let's see how you manage now. You were told not to take what isn't yours, not to touch other people's territories. You have 17 million square kilometers. Why did you have to meddle? Basically, once the remaining air defenses on the peninsula are taken out, then it will be the end for both production and the Russian military facilities that remain. Well, today we have a themed fundraiser, as we do in every episode. A fundraiser for the Defense Forces of Ukraine. Today, it's a themed one. Today, we continue the major fundraiser for vehicles for the Active Operations Unit of the Main Intelligence Directorate, the GUR. FERRATA. The unit specializes in the most complex multi-level tasks. That means both aerial drones and maritime drones. The fighters have recorded a message for you. Please take a look.
Підрозділ активних дій ГУРМО «ФЕРРАТА» дякую Борису Тізенгаузену та його підписникам за допомогу, яку ви надаєте Збройним силам, і просить вас про підтримку наших зборів на автомобілі. Автомобілі – це важливо на фронті, це евакуація, це логістична підтримка наших підрозділів, це підвоз БК, провізії та дронів нашим хлопцям, які стримують ворога на фронті. Просимо вас підтримати наші збори, цінуємо вашу підтримку і допомогу. Слава Україні! Героям слава!
Let's help the fighters of the main intelligence directorate of Ukraine. The link to the fundraiser is in the description of this video. There are Mono and PayPal options for those who want to help from abroad. And there's always a QR code that leads to the fundraiser. That's in case you're watching me on another channel. It's in every episode. A huge thank you from me and from the hundreds of our warriors whom you've already helped. You are simply incredible. And together, of course, we are a great force. Meanwhile, Putin has stated that no attacks by the armed forces of Ukraine will hinder the Russian army. He noted that the Russian army is advancing in all directions and the armed forces are unable to hold back the onslaught. So, are these some kind of versions of replicants? Did they scatter somewhere down there in the dungeons or what? One talks about parity, another says, we're advancing, we're on the offensive. So basically, whichever one they catch, that's the one who speaks. They all have some kind of different agendas. I don't know, it seems to me that even with this statement, Putin is outright trolling Russians, driving them crazy. But you have to give Putin his due. Without any particular talents, without a real education, without experience, in just 2.5 decades he managed to turn Russia from an almost world power into a third world country. What kind of talent does it take to do that? Well, now the Anglo-Saxons have joined in too. The Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Keir Starmer, ordered the armed forces to intercept an oil tanker connected to Russia. This tanker tried to pass through the English Channel. It didn't work out. In short, they seized it. And the Prime Minister thanked the military and law enforcement officers who took part in the operation. But let's hope they won't stop at just one tanker and will continue to take action. But for the entire shadow fleet of the Russian Federation, this is a signal. And the shadow fleet, which helps Russia circumvent sanctions, has very real ship owners for whom this is a new and serious problem. Well then, go ahead and try to find a new route that doesn't go through the English Channel. And today, our forces also struck another critically important facility of the Russian Federation's oil infrastructure. Special Operations Forces struck the Palkino oil pumping station in the Yaroslavl region, an important hub of the Surgut-Polotsk main oil pipeline, through which oil from western Siberia is delivered directly to Russian refineries. Well, to those that are still operating for now. And it also supplies the export direction. That is, over the course of a single night, our drones have already destroyed several facilities. The pace is simply incredible. The Volga region, following Moscow and St. Petersburg, has introduced limits on gasoline sales. In Tatarstan, Tatneft gas stations have imposed a limit of 20 liters per customer, and the local head of the republic, or rather of Tatarstan, reported that queues have been observed at certain gas stations, and because of this, a decision was made to limit sales to no more than 20 liters per customer. So look at what they're doing. They say that the restrictions are because foolish Russians rushed out and created queues. So now the restrictions are because of this, not because oil refineries and pumping stations are burning like this. It's just the Russians. Russians are to blame for everything. But why did the queues appear? That's a good question. If there were no problems with gasoline, then queues at gas stations would actually be a huge plus. Really, if there's a line, great. You sell faster, you earn more. So why introduce limits? Maybe the problem isn't really about the queues. There's gasoline in Moscow, but some gas stations are experiencing shortages. We're talking about Moscow now. Residents of occupied Crimea could tell Muscovites that it all started with such reports for them too. Everything's fine, just minor shortages, no need to create queues. Muscovites, go ahead and ask the residents of occupied Crimea how things are with gasoline there and how much they're paying for it. Resellers are setting some astronomical prices. Historically, Russians don't trust the authorities, which is why they rush to the gas stations. Now, people will start stockpiling, but even that won't help. On TV, they say everything is fine, everything is under control, so why are you rushing to line up at gas stations? Everything is under control. Why are you rushing to withdraw money from the banks? Right now, there is a record outflow of funds from Russian banks. They're told everything is fine, but they don't believe it. Here's another textbook example of news from the Russian Federation that I just couldn't ignore. The serial production of Putin's limousine will be shut down due to losses. Here is that very Aurus. The assembly site in Tatarstan is being shut down. The Russian Rolls-Royce never took off, it won't become mainstream, and that's that. So they've decided to close it down. So what happened? It wasn't even Russian to begin with. In fact, Putin destroyed the remnants of the Soviet auto industry that Russia inherited. Or rather, he destroyed part of it and simply handed the rest over to China. That's all there is to it. The Russian Rolls-Royce died just like the Russian iPhone, the Russian MacBook, and everything else will die. They even tried to create a Russian YouTube, a Russian Boeing. All of this, in principle, was dead from the very beginning. That is, you've probably seen footage where someone sits in front of Putin showing him beautiful slides and telling him that they're going to launch a Russian equivalent of something, but those in the know understand that it's just another dumb money grab. And Putin knows it, and the person sitting in front of him knows it too. But for Russians, it's like, now we're going to release a Russian iPhone. The technological gap isn't measured in years, it's measured in decades, in accumulated investments. BMW spent 100 years building its engineering culture. Apple has been building its ecosystem for 25 years, investing hundreds of billions. Boeing developed its aviation expertise over 2 generations of engineers. But over these 25 years of Putin's rule, Russia has bet on something completely different, exporting raw materials, importing finished goods, and imitating sovereignty. So while Germany was investing in engineering universities, while South Korea was building Samsung from scratch, by the way, through a state-industry symbiosis, and China was buying up technologies and luring specialists from all over the world, Putin's Russia was squandering its oil rent. Aurus is not just a failed project, it is an obituary for the entire 25-year strategy of Putin's rule. Well, there are even some people who praise Putin. One guy came to see him recently. Putin is wise in his decisions not to allow large-scale strikes on Ukraine. This is the former president of the Republic of Srpska, absolutely pro-Russian by the name of Dodik. He emphasized that if Putin had struck Ukraine with something terrible, it would have led to numerous casualties. But Putin is such a humanist, such a humanist. But Putin's wisdom allows him to avoid this catastrophe. They're just completely delusional. 900 Shaheds, 60 missiles in a single day, that according to Dodik is wise and humane. He should be sent there, this Dodik, to the front lines for a week. As for the ghouls who sell their conscience, there's probably no need to even talk about them. Both Orban and Dodik are for sale. I've noticed that everyone who praises Putin is just as old, completely unprincipled, shameless scum, who, by the way, are either out of their minds or do it out of sheer greed. Mussolini also used to praise Hitler like hell in his time. We all know very well how that ended. And here's another piece of news. The former head of Roscosmos, Rogozin, suggested mining Russian tankers and threatened Western countries with oil spills. Well, here we go. Kulok got drunk together with Medvedev, and off they went. So what is Rogozin proposing? He proposes that in response to the seizure of a Shadow Fleet tanker, Russia should mine these tankers, which are completely filled to the brim with oil, so that if a tanker deviates from its route, it would explode and all that oil would spill into the territorial waters of European countries. Rogozin, the former head of Roscosmos, threatened all Western countries with an environmental disaster. Greta Thunberg, it's your cue. Hello. But really, of course, this is classic. What Rogozin is proposing is a classic Russian threat. Remember how one of the main Russian propagandists, Simonyan, suggested detonating a nuclear bomb over Siberia to shut down the internet worldwide? That's exactly them. By the way, Rogozin, with his threat, strangely enough, should actually push Western countries to the idea that Russian oil should not be anywhere near civilized countries at all, including tankers, even in neutral waters. And certainly, this oil should not be purchased in civilized countries. In general, the Russian Federation is gravely ill, along with its inadequate leadership. That is why Russia, just like the USSR, needs to be systematically brought to fragmentation, including by helping Ukraine, and then, once it fragments into smaller states, by all means go ahead and buy oil from an independent Tatarstan, for example, or from an independent Ichkeria, if you wish, states that will no longer pose a threat to their neighbors. And of course, to remove the sting, to deprive them of nuclear weapons. Believe me, it will definitely happen. And as for you, friends, take care of yourselves and your loved ones. Subscribe to this channel, don't forget. And let's help the fighters of the main intelligence directorate of Ukraine. The link to donate is in the description of this video. Wishing everyone a peaceful day and glory to Ukraine.